In this video, I'll quickly go over 7 books that come highly recommended, not just from me, but from the 2 main philosophers we deal with on this channel, Nietzsche and Schopenhauer. If your New Year's resolution is to read more books this year and you're looking for inspiration, look no further. 1. The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, by Laurence Sterne. This book comes highly regarded from both Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, and as a bonus, from Goethe as well, which is why we put it first. The novel begins as an autobiography with the narrator, Tristram Shandy, intending to tell the story of his life. However, he gets sidetracked by digressions, anecdotes, and reflections, so much so that he doesn't even reach his own birth in the narrative until volume 3. The book is known for its unconventional narrative structure, humor, and satire of common literary conventions of the time. Published in 1767, the humor has aged remarkably well, but it does take some time to get used to it. But like all good humorous books, there is a deeper layer to the humor as well. A central feature of the book is its digressive nature. Sterne uses digressions not just as a narrative technique, but as a commentary on life, literature, and human nature. These digressions often lead to discussions on philosophy, medicine, humor, and even the act of writing itself. This makes the book arguably one of the first modernist novels, or at least a worthy precursor to them. The book is highly experimental. There are blank pages. It becomes self-aware at one point, and the stream of consciousness technique, popularized later by the likes of James Joyce, finds its roots here in this novel. Because of the free-flowing nature of the work, hopping from one subject to the next in a humorous, satirical manner, Nietzsche called Sterne the freest author there is. In a book for free spirits, one cannot avoid mention of Laurence Sterne. May he be satisfied with the honor of being called the freest writer of all times, in comparison with whom all others appear stiff, square-toed, intolerant, and downright boorish. Schopenhauer also names Tristram Shandy as one of the 4 immortal novels. We'll get to the other 3 in the rest of the video. The work is also infamous for plagiarizing, or rather, borrowing from other works. Sterne often copies passages from, for example, The Anatomy of Melancholy, works by Francis Bacon, and works by the French author Rabelais, in order to satirize them or arrange them in such a way to make an original philosophical point. However, at the time, most people didn't realize that these passages were copy-pasted. They are, however, original additions to the work, and they're more like a pastiche, to use a modern term, than simply plagiarism. Still, by the end of this book, you'll have gone on a strange journey throughout all aspects of human existence, including philosophy, language, medicine, death, life, the art of writing, military tactics, and the physiognomy of big noses. Highly recommended. 2. Conversations with Goethe by Eckermann. This book, written by Goethe's secretary during his twilight years, has the honor of being the best German language book there is, according to Nietzsche. Very high praise indeed. Apart from Goethe's writings, and especially Goethe's conversations with Eckermann, the best German book in existence, what German prose literature remains that is worth reading over and over again? There is not much in the way of narrative in this book. It takes the form of a diary, where Eckermann basically records his conversations with Goethe based on his own memory of them. Like many memoirists at the time, Eckermann had the habit of immediately writing down an insightful conversation after having it, so the book is more reliable than you might think at first glance when you hear that it's from memory. The book is valuable, therefore, because it basically verbatim records Goethe's thoughts on a wide range of topics, from Greek art to German poetry, to the nature of politics, to the influence of Napoleon, etc. Another wide-ranging book that, when you finish it, it feels as if you've just read all of Wikipedia. A rare and intimate look into the mind of one of the greatest geniuses humanity has produced. We should be very thankful indeed that this book exists. Some critics say that Eckermann was a Goethe fanboy who never dared to contradict his boss, and the book is not actually a conversation with Goethe as much as a Goethe monologue. They are correct, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Eckermann had the humility to know his place and didn't try to argue with the greatest mind of his century. Like a good interviewer, he let Goethe speak, asked the right questions to know more, and never becomes so presumptuous as to inject his own opinions. What Eckermann did right, however, is arranging Goethe's answers in a beautiful way. He took the words of Goethe, plain answers in spoken language, and put them into beautiful prose. As an aspiring poet himself, Eckermann knew what he was doing. The dialogues cover a wide range of topics, including literature, art, science, philosophy, and politics. Goethe shares his views on works of his contemporaries and predecessors, and offers critiques, praises, and personal anecdotes related to his own works as well. But the book also covers Goethe's interest in the sciences, his opposition to Newtonian physics, his unique theory of color, and ideas on art, beauty, and nature. And, historically, the book is important because it's a document relating the sentiment in Europe after the Napoleonic Wars, the rise of nationalism, and the precipice of the Industrial Revolution. Another encyclopedic work well worth your time this year. Now, let's stick with Goethe and talk about one of Schopenhauer's favorite books. 3. Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship. Schopenhauer, like all good Germans, adored Goethe, but he singled out this particular novel of his for explicit praise as one of the 4 immortal novels. Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship is the quintessential Bildungsroman, a story of a young man, Wilhelm Meister, growing into his proper place in the world, with all the trials and tribulations that encompasses. He is smart, a well-to-do young man of a bourgeois background who is initially attracted to the theater. Schopenhauer loved the book in particular because it contains large discussions and digressions on one of his favorite authors, William Shakespeare. In fact, a central plot point of the book is the staging of a production of Hamlet, with Wilhelm Meister spending considerable time comparing himself to Hamlet, pontificating on mortality, the reception of Shakespeare in Germany, etc. More broadly speaking, Wilhelm Meister's life and attraction to the theater are metaphors for life itself, and the novel, on a philosophical level, deals with the ephemeral nature of existence and the redemptive role of art in human existence and society. As a Bildungsroman, you follow Wilhelm Meister from youth to adulthood as he matures not just physically, but learns more about his place in the world and the meaning of life. He starts out naive and idealistic, and throughout the years he learns to come to a more nuanced view of life, art, and perhaps most importantly, love. Goethe later wrote a sequel, Wilhelm Meister's Wanderjahre, his journeyman years, which continues Wilhelm's story but with a different focus on his further life and societal contributions. We'll get to the other 2 immortal novels that Schopenhauer mentions, but first, another Nietzsche recommendation. 4. The Red and the Black, Stendhal. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche calls Stendhal the last great psychologist and a free-spirited philosopher. Later in life, he will discover Dostoevsky, and Stendhal will lose the title of last great psychologist. I mention Dostoevsky here in order to not neglect him, but I assume most viewers of the channel are familiar with Dostoevsky, and particular with Nietzsche's favorite book of his, Notes from the Underground. We've done quite a bit of videos on Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, so let's focus back on Stendhal for a moment. Stendhal's Le Rouge et le Noir, The Red and the Black, is a masterpiece of psychological writing. We follow Julien Sorel, a young man of many talents who tries to claim his rightful place in the social order of 19th century France during the Bourbon Restoration in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Age. As such, the novel has 2 distinct aspects to it. It's a psychological portrait of its protagonist on the one hand, and an exploration of French society on the other. Stendhal spends considerable time writing about Julien's psychological struggles, the tension between his desires and the reality of the world, his inner conflicts, his desire for a great station in life at odds with his more impulsive nature dictated by his passions. I singled out Le Rouge et le Noir, but Nietzsche rarely discusses books. Rather, he discusses authors. So I feel like I have to mention Stendhal's other masterpiece as well, La Chartreuse de Parme, or The Charterhouse of Parma. Another psychological masterpiece. This time around, we follow an Italian nobleman in the Napoleonic era and beyond. Not just favored by Nietzsche, this book also inspired the likes of Balzac, Tolstoy, Lampedusa, and Hemingway. 2 books well worth your time. Let's stay in the French language for one more immortal novel favored by Schopenhauer. 5. Julie ou la Nouvelle Héloïse by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. This novel is arguably the first international bestseller in history and catapulted Rousseau to immortal celebrity as an author. About his fame, he once boasted that there was not a single woman in Paris he wouldn't be able to get into bed, and God knows he tried. Julie is an epistolary novel, meaning that it takes the form of an exchange of letters between two lovers. The title refers to Héloïse d'Argenteuil, a French nun who had an infamous love affair and literary correspondence with Pierre Abélard, the leading medieval theologian and philosopher at the time. A tale of forbidden love, reminiscent of Romeo and Juliet, Abélard was famously castrated by a group of men sent by Héloïse's uncle in order to punish him for his passionate affair with his niece Héloïse. Julie, then, is the new Héloïse. The letters take you through a love affair between Julie and her unnamed tutor, and the novel deals with themes such as authenticity, virtue, the nature of love, and the authority of the church. A common thread throughout the book is Rousseau's theory of virtue, holding that virtuous action should only be pursued insofar as it's in accordance with one's own moral compass. That is to say, one's own sense of morality can override the teachings of the church. For this reason, the book was banned by the Catholic Church and put on its infamous list of prohibited books, the Index Librorum Prohibitorum. The book was such an overwhelming success that Rousseau was inundated with fan mail from readers who could scarcely believe that the novel was the product of Rousseau's mind rather than something that happened in real life. Scores of readers wrote to him, asking him what happened to the characters of the novel, as if they were real people who actually existed in the world. One famous letter is from a certain Madame Duverger. Many persons who have read your book, to whom I have spoken, have assured me that you thought it all up. This I cannot believe. Once more, monsieur, did Julie exist? Is Saint-Preux still alive? In what part of this world does he live? In other letters, readers tell Rousseau they bawled their eyes out reading this story, and maybe you will too, dear viewer. 6. Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. The book that needs no introduction. The last of Schopenhauer's 4 immortal novels. You'll notice that Schopenhauer, ever the polyglot, chose 4 books in 4 different languages. Tristram Shandy in English, Wilhelm Meister in German, Julie in French, and Don Quixote in Spanish. Don Quixote follows an old protagonist who is so immersed in medieval literature he ultimately starts to believe he's a knight himself, and we follow him around as he travels the country looking for noble quests to improve the world, but we quickly discover his pursuits are in vain. Unable to distinguish reality from fantasy, the most famous scene is where he takes up arms against windmills in a field, thinking they are giants terrorizing the Spanish countryside. The novel is far from simply a comedy, however. Quixote, over the course of the novel, turns into more of a tragic figure. His noble intentions are shattered, his worldview is based on a lie, and in the 21st century, it's easy to read Don Quixote not just as a bumbling fool to make fun of, but as an old man who is suffering from something like Alzheimer's disease. For Schopenhauer, the greatness of a novel is measured not in what happens in the external world, but in what happens in the internal world. Every novel he mentions is not focused on facts, but on feelings. They are heavy on characterization, and the protagonists in these works undergo significant changes in their mentalities and worldviews. Usually, they go from idealistic and naive to more practical and nuanced. Don Quixote's ending in particular is cause for debate. Is it about the healthy maturation of the spirit, or is it a sad lament on how lofty ambitions die as we grow older? Does it celebrate reality, or decry the loss of dreams? Set some time aside this year to read this novel, which arguably is the first novel in the modern sense of the word, and I promise you'll be better off for it. Because 7 is a better number than 6, I want to leave you with a recommendation of my own, which is not mentioned by either Nietzsche or Schopenhauer, but I believe both would have loved it. 7. War and Peace by Tolstoy. Personally, I reread this masterpiece every January to start off the year. Yes, it's long, but yes, it's worth it. Dostoevsky often takes the title for Best Russian Psychologist, but I think there's a good case for Tolstoy as well. War and Peace follows the life and times of 5 Russian aristocratic families against the backdrop of Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812. Tolstoy insisted this book be not called a novel. Instead, he argued that it is simply what he wanted to express in the way that he expressed it. That's because the novel mixes fiction with real history in a way that hadn't really been done before. Real historical figures, such as Napoleon, mix with Tolstoy's fictional characters, and large chunks of the book are not fiction at all, but essays on the nature of warfare, how history is written, how history is made, free will versus determinism, and the significance of the individual for world history. The realism in this work is unparalleled, and it's been said that if the world could write, it would write like Tolstoy. There's a certain scene where some nobles are hunting in the forest that is particularly evocative in how precisely and movie-like Tolstoy manages to describe a hunting dog in pursuit of game. As we follow these 5 noble families, each with their different worldviews, opinions, ambitions, and attitudes, we're taking on a journey through life itself, dealing with birth, death, poverty, wealth, the fear of dying, and the meaning of it all. We go from battle scenes at Austerlitz, where soldiers get slaughtered, straight to domestic scenes where rich nobles worry about who to marry. We go from extravagant dancing balls to the burning of Moscow and famines. This book really, almost literally, has it all. I leave you with a final quote of Tolstoy, written to a friend of his and also a translator of Schopenhauer, written in the same year that War and Peace was published. Do you know what this summer has been for me? An endless ecstasy over Schopenhauer and a series of mental pleasures such as I've never experienced before. I do not know whether I shall ever change my opinion, but as present, I'm confident that Schopenhauer is the greatest genius among men. So, to reiterate, these books are worth your time and come highly regarded by either Nietzsche and or Schopenhauer and or myself. Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern, Conversations with Goethe by Eckermann, Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship by Goethe, The Red and the Black by Stendhal, but also The Charterhouse of Parma, bonus mention for Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky, Julie ou la Nouvelle Héloïse by Rousseau, Don Quixote by Cervantes, and War and Peace by Tolstoy. If you want to buy these books, I've put Amazon links in the description of the video to where you can buy them. You'll also support the channel if you bought them through our link at no extra cost to yourself. Of course, another way to support the channel is simply to like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. So, with all of that said, again, Happy New Year and thank you for watching. A shout out goes out to our Patreons who keep the channel alive. If you want access to exclusive videos, including book reviews, take a look at our Patreon page and support us. It's what keeps the channel afloat. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.